Hi everybody, it's Chris and welcome back to another video. I thought today I would jump on a thread that I've been seeing going around the vinyl community, and that's this idea of show the 10 records that you play the most. Now, like lots of you watching this, I've got a really big collection. I've got about 2,500 albums and probably about 2,045s. And to be honest, I don't play them very much. You know, I do when I first get them, and then I put them into the collection, and now and then, you know, the odd one, of course, comes out and gets played. But by and large, there aren't 10 records that I'm currently listening to the most, bar the ones that I've just recently bought, and they feature on my vinyl finds videos. So what I thought I would do is just go back to the days where I had a really small collection, and I used to, probably like many of you, play the records that I had again and again and again. I'm going back to the time where I first started buying albums and 45s, and so I've got some records to share. I think it's probably more than 10 of albums and singles that back in the day I used to listen to all the time, and actually consequently I probably still do listen to them quite a bit now. They come up on my phone quite often when I'm out running, for example. So I'll show you a few things here. So the first single I've got, and this is one of the first records that I really remember really liking, actually, and I didn't own it at the time, but I just used to love it when it used to come on the radio, and I used to sing along to it, and when I couldn't hear it I used to sing it as well, because back in the late 60s I was really into space travel and people landing on the moon. I was obsessed with NASA and all that kind of stuff, and there was a song that came out at the time that was just so of the moment, and it was David Bowie's Space Oddity. I never owned it at the time, as I said, and this is just something that I bought, you know, in the last 10 years or so, if I'm honest, but it's a song that I used to love hearing on the radio. But the first song that I ever owned, the first record I ever owned, was a present from my nan, and it must have been around about 1974, I would have thought, and I used to love this and play this a lot. It's Tiger Feet by Mud. So a real kind of cheesy pop song from back in the day, but I used to love that song. I used to play that an incredible amount. But I really want to focus on the time that I first started buying records myself. And that was probably in 1976, 77. So I started secondary school in 75. And one of the things that I noted in my musical taste is it become a whole lot more adult. So just before, when I was at primary school, I used to listen to a lot of kind of pop music and so on, whatever was in the charts. And I carried that on for a number of years, but I was very much influenced by the older lads at school. I went to Poole Grammar School down in Poole and Dorset on the south coast of England, and at that school I remember all the old lads used to come to school with these great big Adidas holdalls, and on the holdalls they used to draw the logos of bands like Pink Floyd and Genesis and Yes and Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. And as someone, you know, quite young, just starting secondary school, I just wanted to be cool like them. And so I started to listen to bits of that kind of music, usually through the older brothers of some of my friends. But I was still really interested in the charts. So going back to probably what is one of my favourite years for music, which is 1977. And there were a number of songs in the charts that year that I still play a lot today, actually. So here's a couple of examples. The first one is She's Not There by Santana. I absolutely loved this song back in 1977. I didn't realise then actually it was a cover, and I did actually go on later on in the year to buy the album that it came from, Moonflower, which is a half live, half studio album. Really loved this album actually, especially Toussaint L'Ouverture, which closes the album, a live version of that, and a song, there was a new song called Transcendence, which was quite gentle to start with, but it features the most amazing guitar solo from Carlos Santana. So if you've not heard Transcendence, you must play that one. Another song from the charts from 77 that I used to play kind of like on repeat once I bought it on 45, and I still love playing it now actually, was Boz Scaggs and Lido Shuffle. Fantastic song. I really love that song. I think there's quite a lot of members of Toto who provide the backing for that particular song, but that's a song that I still love today. In the charts at that time as well was kind of my introduction to prog rock, really, and that was Fanfare for the Common Man by ELP. So this is a single that came out in 77, back with Brain Salad Surgery, and I used to absolutely love this particular single, and again used to play that on repeat. One of my favourite singles from 77 is a song I still love hearing today. I probably don't reach for it as much as maybe I used to, but if it comes on the radio, I always turn it up because I love it. And that's Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. I think it's the most sort of stream song in their catalogue, actually. And it's one of my favourite songs of theirs, actually. So certainly one of my favourite songs of 77. Now, 77 was renowned, obviously, for being the start of the punk era. And being 14 as I was in 1977, I didn't have a huge amount of money, and so 45s was very much the kinds of things that I bought. And if I'm honest, punk was a real 45 culture. It wasn't particularly an album culture, although obviously there are some albums associated with it. But the sorts of songs that I was listening to at the time on repeat were the 45s I bought at the time. So Peaches by the Stranglers, which was so edgy at the time because it said "oh shit" and all that kind of stuff on it. Back with Go Buddy Go, which was a double A side but a fantastic song, love that. As was this one, Gary Gilmore's Eyes. So I think Gary Gilmore was some kind of was he some type of murderer or something who donated his eyes to science once he was killed on death row. So I used to love that British band, the Adverts. Another song that I played all the time, really short song, used to play this really loud. If my mum was still around, she'd probably remember this song, and that was White Riot by The Clash. I used to absolutely adore that song, used to play that a lot, as I used to also play this one as well, In the City by The Jam. And all of these singles are singles that I bought in 77 and have kept since. And the other band that I played were not so much a punk band, although they were lumped into that kind of genre, really, more of a pub rock band, and that was the Rods, previously Eddie and the Hot Rods, but this is their song Do Anything You Want to Do, which came out in 77, and I played that single to death. But there were a few singles that I played by one particular band that again I absolutely adore, and I still play them today. I think they only had one album, and all of these singles were on that album, and I think it's one of the greatest albums of all time. And of course we're talking about 1977 and the Sex Pistols. So this for me was absolutely edgy, cutting edge, whatever you want to call it, stuff at the time. So obviously I played God Save the Queen all the time, as I did Anarchy in the UK. Of course I played Holidays in the Sun. What a fantastic cover that is. And the song that I loved the most, actually, without a doubt, from the Pistols in that era was Pretty Vacant, and I still play that song today. And if I'm honest, I probably have played this at least once a week since it came out in 1977. It quite often comes up when my phone is on shuffle when I'm playing Spotify, when I'm out running. So Pretty Vacant by the Sex Pistols. Also in 77 was a song, again, I still play today. It's on a playlist that I often have when I'm out running, actually. And of course it's Roadrunner by Jonathan Richman. I didn't realise at the time, actually, that it was a fairly old song. It came out in 1975, but was kind of remixed or whatever for 1977. And there was another punk song that, again, I still play today. I don't know if it's their best song, but it's the one I like the most from them. They're an Australian band called The Saints, and This Perfect Day. And this song I just played again and again and again, as I did with all my 45s. Things like, for example, Swallow My Pride by the Ramones, and Rockaway Beach by the Ramones. That song is probably one of my favourite songs of all time. And again, I just played those again and again and again. And a slightly more obscure 45 from 1977. And I remember buying this, actually, and it was a little bit of a punt, actually. But I remember buying it in a shop called Armadillo Records in Bournemouth, which I used to love going to. And it's by the Heartbreakers, and it's One Track Mind. It's one of my favourite kind of songs from that particular era. And I played that on repeat in 77. I was also into rock in 1977, as well as kind of punk rock. And there was a band that came out at the time And I like the look of the cover, I like the name, and I remember getting it home and playing it, and it wasn't really punk, and I guess it was kind of heavy metal, it was just different really, and that was Motorhead by Motorhead. And I played this I'm surprised that I haven't played this single for a little while. I wonder if it still plays. I played it that many times. This is proper loud, and I think my mum used to hate that. But in '77, there was a few other singles that came out in the kind of rock genre rather than punk rock genre. So I was into Deep Purple. I'll share some albums in a moment that I played a lot in this kind of era. But a single came out in 1977 that a track I was aware of. It was Black Knight. It was a live version. Again, I was aware of it because it was on the first album I ever bought, which I'll show in a second. But it had a B-side with two songs, Painted Horse, which wasn't particularly that great, but a song called When a Blind Man Cries, which I didn't realise was a B-side of Never Before, and absolutely loved it. This was New Live and Rare EP from 1977. I think this actually charted on purple vinyl, and again, I played that so many times. When I play it now, I know it note for note in terms of what it sounds like. And in '77, that was also my introduction to an offshoot of Deep Purple, and that was Rainbow. And the first thing I ever heard by Rainbow was the live version, because the live version actually came out before the studio version, of Kill the King. Kill the King was the opening song they used at concerts. It also opened the album on stage. A couple of years later, I realised it came in a picture sleeve, and so caught up and got a picture sleeve version of it. But they were the 45s that I played. Now, Black Knight by Deep Purple was a song that I was aware of because it featured on the first album I ever bought. So I bought this, I must have been probably in either the second or third year at school, so either 76 or 77, round about that kind of time. But this was the first album I ever bought, and I just played this again and again and again. And again, knew it off by heart really, and that album introduced me to several by them, the obvious one being this. So Made in Japan, for me, this is the greatest album of all time, certainly the greatest live album of all time. The production on it, given that it's recorded in '72, is breathtaking. Martin Birch did an amazing version, amazing production on this particular album, and the versions of these songs, so Highway Star, Smoke on the Water, Space Trucking, Lazy, Strange Kind of Woman, Child in Time, I don't think they were ever played better than they were on this particular album. The only thing that mars it for me is the Mule, which features a drum solo, which is unnecessary. Round about that time as well, I had a friend who had two older brothers. They introduced me to a load of music, so this was round about 76, 77. And so the first album, a studio album that I bought by Deep Purple actually, was an odd one really, because it was one without Ritchie Blackmore. So this is the album that has Tommy Bolin playing on it. It came out in '75, I think it was. And so I bought it when it was only a couple of years old. And this was an album that was played a lot by the brothers of one of my friends. And I bought the album, and I still love it today. And this was an introduction also to the guitar talents of Tommy Bolin. I also at the time bought Made in Europe, which again, I played this again and again and again. And the opening track, Burn, I think is possibly even Deep Purple's greatest moment actually. So this was Mark III Deep Purple, so with Ritchie Blackmore, but with Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale playing alongside Ian Pace and John Lord. And this was kind of cobbled together from a variety of concerts across Europe back in '74, I guess, but this was released in '76, and I bought it around about '76, '77, that kind of time, not long after 24 Carat. Other albums that I was playing at that time, those 4 Sex Pistols singles didn't stop me buying Nevermind the Bollocks. I remember getting this in a shop in Poole. I can't remember which shop. I had to hunt around for it because there were quite a lot of shops like Smith's and Boots that banned it. And I remember getting this home and bringing it home in the bag and hoping my mum wouldn't see it. But just still remains one of my favourite albums and something I play quite a lot. And a couple of albums also from the same kind of era that I bought as a result of singles. So I mentioned Rockaway Beach. I absolutely love that song, as well as Sheena is a Punk Rocker, both of which feature on Rocket to Russia, which I think is the best Ramones album. I bought that probably early 78, I would have thought, something like that, as I did this one as well. That's also early 78, maybe late 77, I'm somewhere around there. In early 1978, I went to see a band live who became one of my favourite bands, whose albums I would play endlessly when I was kind of approaching my O-level years, so 1978-9, and then into sixth form. So in 1978, I went to see Rush play. They played at the Southampton Gaumont, and I can't remember, it was quite early on in 1978. And I didn't rush out straight away, I didn't rush out and buy Farewell to Kings, actually. The first Rush album that I did buy came out later on that year, and that was Hemispheres. And I knew this album off by heart because, you know, back in the day when you don't have very many records, you just play the ones you've got to death. You just play them again and again and again. It's not like Spotify where you constantly, flicking around and moving on songs and so on. You just play the album from beginning to end. And I remember being, just obsessed with La Via Strangiata from this. I loved it when I saw the band do that live. I saw them a couple of times, or probably about 4 times live, and a couple of times on the Hemispheres sort of tour as well. So that was an album I certainly played again and again. Now in 78, I also saw Blue Oyster Cult. I saw them in Bournemouth Winter Gardens, which was probably somewhere in the middle of the year in about 1978. They were supported by Japan, who were just dreadful. But anyway, these were a great band. And I remember rushing out, having seen them, and bought this particular single, Don't Fear the Reaper. But it wasn't that I played loads. It was a live album that I also bought probably about a week after that particular song. And it's this one, On Your Feet or On Your Knees. Now, I think this, for me anyway, this is one of the greatest live albums of all time. I absolutely love this album, and still today I will put this album on. This is one of my most played albums, I would think. I think it's brilliant. I think, as I said, I think it's one of the greatest live albums of all time. I think some of the versions of the songs on here are marvellous. I grew up with this album, and I used to play it again and again, so I know it so well, and it's nostalgic to hear this, without a doubt. And then later on, in 78, I went to see Black Sabbath, and they were supported by a lesser-known band at the time called Van Halen, who blew them away, actually. But not long after that particular concert, I remember buying Running with the Devil, with a single by Van Halen. But I also bought this album. This is my first ever Black Sabbath. I got the entire discography now, but this was the album that I bought just after seeing them. We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll, a compilation, double compilation, with, for me, some of their just most amazing songs on here. So Paranoid's obviously on, War Pigs, Iron Man, Fairies Wear Boots, Children of the Grave, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, NIB, and I think their greatest song, which is Black Sabbath. So I remember buying that. And also the last one is an album that I played, as I said, again and again and again. And I don't think any of my friends really knew about it. I remember hearing it on, although I lived down on the south coast in Poole, I was able to get Radio Bristol on my radio, and they had a rock show. I think it was either Saturday or Sunday I think. And I remember them playing one particular track and thinking, oh my God, I need this album. And so I went out and bought it. And it's this album, the live album by Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush. And I think I was the only person around in my year group that really knew much about Frank Marino at the time. And I just played this album again and again. There's the track listing there, get rid of the glare. I absolutely love this album, and I will still play this album. And again, like all of these songs, whenever they come on Spotify or I put them on vinyl, I almost know them note for note. So I'm not sure what the 10 albums or records that I play the most are now, I've absolutely no idea, but they're the albums and the 45s that I used to play loads. So let me know what you think in the comments below. What were your favourites from that kind of era? And no doubt I'll be back sometime soon with another video. Take care. Cheers. Thanks.